He's three law firms on retainer. I don't know how much money is coming in, but I know that a lot of money is going out every single month for Diddy.
Here's a rewritten version with a more balanced and cautious tone. A high-stakes legal battle is unfolding that could pull one of hip-hop's most powerful figures back into one of the genre's most painful unsolved chapters. In a Las Vegas courtroom, attorneys for Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, the only person ever charged in connection with the 1996 killing of Tupac Shakur, are pursuing a strategy that has stunned legal observers. Davis has previously claimed in interviews and in his memoir that music executive Sean Combs once offered money to target Shakur and Suge Knight. Combs has never been charged in connection with Shakur's death, and law enforcement has publicly stated he is not a suspect. He has consistently denied any involvement in past interviews. Now, Davis's defense team is exploring whether to subpoena Combs to testify at trial, a move that could dramatically shift the narrative inside the courtroom. The legal theory is complex. If Davis's prior statements naming Combs are true, the defense argues, then investigators should have pursued conspiracy charges. If they did not, the defense may argue that the alleged offer never existed. In other words, Davis's team appears to be leveraging the absence of charges against Combs as part of its reasonable doubt strategy. Legal analysts describe the maneuver as risky. Calling a high-profile witness who flatly denies allegations could either undermine the defense or complicate the prosecution's case. The situation is further intensified by Combs' current legal troubles. In 2005, he was convicted on federal charges unrelated to the Shakur case and is serving a prison sentence. His business empire has reportedly faced financial strain amid ongoing civil litigation. None of those matters involve charges related to the 1996 homicide. Still,
he's saying that, Diddy, he put a hit out on you and Tupac, and that's the reason why Tupac got in Vegas. So, yeah, man, how you feel about that?
Well, first thing first. I mean, that conversation been out there. He put his truth out there. A lot of other people put their truth out there.
Decades-old tensions from the East Coast-West Coast rivalry continue to cast a long shadow. The killings of the notorious B.I.G. in 1997 and Shakur months earlier remain two of the most scrutinized crimes in music history. Both cases fueled years of speculation, documentaries, books, and competing investigative theories. Former detectives, journalists, and industry insiders have put forward various accounts over the years. However, many of those claims remain disputed, unproven, or based on conflicting testimony. Davis himself has shifted his public position multiple times.
The reason we asked everyone to be here today is obviously we are the new attorneys for Dwayne Davis in the Tupac case, now set for trial February of next year. The reason in particular that we asked the media to be here is that, obviously we're not trying the case in the media, but we want to establish better relations.
Points admitting involvement in interviews, and at other times suggesting he exaggerated for attention or financial gain. Prosecutors argue his own recorded statements are powerful evidence. His defense contends those statements were unreliable. If Combs is called to testify, he would almost certainly deny any allegation of offering money to harm Shakur, consistent with his long-standing public position. Whether such testimony would help or hurt, either side remains uncertain. The prosecution, meanwhile, must decide how much attention to give conspiracy theories that extend beyond the charged defendant. Expanding the scope of the trial could introduce distractions. Ignoring it entirely could give the defense space to raise doubt. At its core, the upcoming trial, currently expected in 2200, is about one question. Can the state prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Davis played a direct role in Shakur's killing? Everything else, the rumors, the rivalries, the decades of speculation, may shape public conversation. But inside the courtroom, only admissible evidence will matter. After nearly 30 years, the case remains one of the most consequential in hip-hop history. Whether the trial finally delivers clarity or deepens the mystery is something the world will be watching closely. If you'd like, I can also create a high-retention YouTube intro, hook-write a dramatic but legally safe thumbnail title crea.
I think that they don't want, if they was in any of those freak-off tapes, if they played a part in any of those Diddy sessions, they don't want it to get out to the general public.
Here's a more extended, dramatic, but legally careful rewrite that keeps tension high while clearly framing all allegations as claims, not facts. Nearly 3 decades after the killing of Tupac Shakur, a courtroom strategy is emerging that could reopen some of hip-hop's deepest wounds. At the center of it all is Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, the only person ever charged in connection with the 1996 Las Vegas shooting. Prosecutors say Davis's own recorded statements place him inside the vehicle from which shots were fired. His defense team, however, appears to be preparing a move that could shift focus far beyond him. Over the years, Davis has publicly claimed that music mogul Sean Combs once offered money to target Shakur and Suge Knight during the height of the East Coast-West Coast rivalry. Combs has never been charged in connection with Shakur's death, and authorities have publicly stated he is not a suspect. He has consistently denied any involvement. Now, Davis's attorneys are exploring whether Combs should be called to testify. It's a bold legal calculation. If Combs takes the stand and denies the allegation under oath, the defense could argue that Davis's past statements were exaggerated or fabricated, potentially weakening the prosecution's case. But if prosecutors avoid calling Combs altogether, the defense may argue that the state is unwilling to pursue the broader conspiracy Davis described. Legal experts say the move resembles a high-risk chess play, force the narrative into the open, and make the prosecution choose between expanding the scope of the trial or defending why they didn't. The stakes are enormous. The Shakur case has always existed in the shadow of another tragedy, the 1997 killing of the notorious B.I.G., whose death remains unsolved. For years, speculation about retaliation, rivalry, and behind-the-scenes power struggles fueled books, documentaries, and investigative reporting. But speculation has never equaled proof. Combs, who co-founded Bad Boy Rico,
I realized Big was that type of rapper that he could get at somebody, and I think Puff was trying to tell him, don't go that route. You understand what I'm saying? But still putting out songs like Who Shot Ya in the intro, but telling Big not to go at nobody, which was crazy.
Today, however, he faces unrelated federal legal troubles stemming from separate charges for which he was convicted in 2000. Those charges do not involve the Shakur homicide. Still, his incarceration has added new complexity to the unfolding courtroom strategy in Las Vegas. Davis's own credibility is a central issue. In interviews and in his memoir, he described events surrounding the shooting in detail. Prosecutors argue those statements are admissions. His defense suggests some accounts were exaggerated, misinterpreted, or motivated by financial opportunity. If Combs is subpoenaed, his testimony could become one of the most scrutinized moments in modern music legal history. If he refuses to testify, the defense may attempt to frame that silence as meaningful. If he testifies and firmly denies the claims,
As far as, is he going to turn people in? Is he going to cooperate? If the federal government wants him to cooperate and they're going to cut his time, because right now he's looking at 15 to life. With all the charges he has to, he won't get out until 70 years old. He about 70, that's when they start talking about letting him come to a halfway house.
the defense could argue that the absence of conspiracy charges supports reasonable doubt. But there is another possibility, that the jury focuses solely on the evidence directly tying Davis to the crime. At its core, the case is about whether prosecutors can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Davis played a criminal role in the 1996 shooting. The broader allegations, while dramatic, may or may not influence that narrow legal question. The trial, currently scheduled for 2006, could become one of the most closely watched proceedings in music history. After decades of rumors, documentaries, and competing narratives, the courtroom may finally separate admissible evidence from long-standing speculation. One thing is certain, whatever happens inside that Las Vegas courtroom will echo far beyond it. And after 30 years of unanswered questions, the world will be watching. If you want, I can now make this even darker and more cinematic, turn it into a 10-minute high-retention YouTube script, create a viral title plus description plus hashtags, or write a part 2 continuation connecting past rivalries in a legally safe way.
The boy Puffy called me though. Puffy called me back in the day. He called me, he was like, I just want you to know I ain't have nothing to do with your brothers. You know, I know who you are, but we never met. And I just want to call you man to man, let you know that I ain't have nothing to do with your brothers. Now, why was he calling me, reaching out to me?
Here's a longer, more cinematic continuation. Still intense, but carefully framed around allegations, legal strategy, and documented facts, rather than presenting claims as proven truth. The Las Vegas trial isn't just about what happened on September 7, 1996. It's about narrative control. For nearly 30 years, the killing of Tupac Shakur has existed in two worlds, the official record and the cultural memory. The official record is sparse. A drive-by shooting after a Mike Tyson fight, a hospital stay, a death 6 days later. The cultural memory is far more complicated, layered with rivalries, rumors, and accusations that have never fully disappeared. Dwayne Keefe D. Davis is the first person prosecutors have ever charged in the case. They say his own recorded statements place him at the center of events. They argue that his interviews, including those given years before his arrest, describe direct knowledge of the shooting. But Davis's defense appears to be building something larger than a simple denial. They are attempting to widen the lens. Over the years, Davis has publicly alleged that Sean Combs offered money to harm Shakur and Suge Knight. Combs has repeatedly denied any involvement in Shakur's death. Law enforcement has also stated he is not considered a suspect. Still, the defense may try to use those historical claims strategically. Here's why that matters. If Davis once claimed someone powerful financed the crime, but prosecutors have never charged that person, the defense can suggest inconsistencies in the investigation. They can ask jurors, if this was truly a conspiracy, where are the conspiracy charges? If it wasn't, then why were those statements taken seriously at all? It's a legal pressure point, and it's unfolding at a time when Combs is already facing significant legal and financial challenges unrelated to the Shakur case. In 2005, he was convicted on federal charges in a separate matter and is serving a sentence. Those convictions have nothing to do with perception, however, is not proof. Inside the courtroom, prosecutors will likely focus narrowly on Davis, his past admissions, corroborating evidence, and the timeline surrounding the Las Vegas shooting. The state's burden is not to solve every rumor from the 90s. It is to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Davis committed the crime charged. The defense, on the other hand, doesn't need to prove an alternative theory. They only need to introduce doubt. And doubt can grow in silence. The unsolved killing of the notorious B.I.G. in 1997 still hovers over this case. The two tragedies are often discussed together, framed as mirror images of a violent era in hip-hop. Numerous books, documentaries, and former investigators have proposed competing explanations, some alleging retaliation, others pointing to gang rivalries, and still others questioning investigative decisions. But decades later, many of those theories remain just that, theories. If Combs were called to testify, the moment would be historic. Not because it would automatically answer lingering questions, but because it would place decades of speculation under oath. A denial would not legally prove innocence. An accusation would not legally prove guilt. Only admissible evidence and jury deliberation could determine the outcome of Davis's trial. And there's another factor: credibility. Davis
named Diddy 77 times in court documents related to Tupac.
Has at times described his past interviews as exaggerated or mischaracterized. Prosecutors say his own words are incriminating. The defense may argue they were influenced by ego, storytelling, or financial motives tied to media exposure. Jurors will be asked to decide which version, if either, they believe. Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, the cultural impact is undeniable. The East Coast-West Coast rivalry reshaped hip-hop in the 1990s. Careers were built. Lives were lost. Legacies were permanently altered. The question now is whether this trial will finally narrow the focus to evidence or reopen debates that have lingered.
If that's part of the indictment, that's somewhat like a blackmail. He was blackmailing people to be in the freak-offs. So that's federal. That could be that's a federal charge. He can't blackmail people to say, yo, listen here, you did it once and you're gonna do it again. That ain't gonna make it with the government or nobody.
What makes this trial different from every documentary, podcast, and interview that came before it is simple. This time, someone is under oath. For years, the killing of Tupac Shakur lived in a grey area between law enforcement files and cultural mythology. There were theories, there were televised accusations, there were former detectives writing books and insiders giving interviews, but there were no indictments. Now there is one. Dwayne Keefe D. Davis is not fighting public opinion. He is fighting a criminal charge that carries the possibility of life behind bars. Prosecutors say his own past words place him inside the vehicle involved in the 1996 Las Vegas shooting. They argue that recorded interviews and corroborating details are more than storytelling. They are admissions. The defense sees it differently. Their strategy appears to hinge on reframing those same statements as unreliable. Exaggerated accounts from a man who had nothing to lose at the time and everything to gain from attention. If those statements can be cast as performance rather than confession, the prosecution's foundation weakens. And this is where the name Sean Combs re-enters the conversation. For years, Davis publicly alleged that Combs once offered money to target Shakur and Suge Knight. Combs has consistently denied any involvement. Law enforcement has also said he has never been considered a suspect in Shakur's death. Yet the defense may attempt to use those past allegations as leverage. If Davis fabricated the story about an alleged bounty, why fabricate something so explosive? And if he didn't fabricate it, why has no conspiracy charge followed? Those are the types of questions defense attorneys might want jurors to wrestle with. Not to prove an alternative theory, but to create uncertainty about the prosecution's narrative. Because criminal trials are not about solving every mystery, they are about reasonable doubt. Meanwhile, the broader backdrop is impossible to ignore. The 1990s East Coast.
I don't think they are scared of him. I think they more so, they don't want him to embarrass their reputation and things that they've been known for. You understand?
Over time, overlapping theories about both deaths became part of hip-hop folklore. Some investigators have suggested gang involvement, others have floated retaliation narratives, still others have criticized how early leads were handled, but folklore does not equal evidence. Inside the Clark County courtroom, jurors will not be asked to settle decades of speculation. They will be asked something narrower and more specific. Did the state prove its case against Davis beyond a reasonable doubt? If Combs is called to testify, the moment could be legally dramatic, but procedurally straightforward. He would likely deny the allegations under oath, consistent with his long-standing public position. That denial, in itself, would not determine the outcome. It would simply become another piece of testimony for jurors to weigh. If he is not called, the defense could still argue that the absence of broader charges raises questions. Either way, the spotlight shifts, and timing matters. Combs is currently serving a federal sentence on unrelated charges stemming from a separate case in 2025. Those convictions are not connected to the Shakur homicide. However, public perception often blends legal narratives, even when courts do not. Jurors, however, will be instructed to separate reputation from evidence. That may be the hardest task of all, because after 30 years, emotions remain raw.
We're not taking this case trying to win it on a technicality. We're obviously still getting up to speed on the case, but we anticipate.
For many fans, Tupac Shakur is more than a victim in a case file. He is a cultural symbol. For others, the unresolved killing of the notorious B.I.G. represents a wound that never healed. This trial will not rewrite history. It will not resolve every theory circulating online. It will not answer every what if whispered for decades, but it will do something far more consequential. It will test whether the evidence that exists today can withstand scrutiny in a court of law. And when the verdict finally comes, whether in 2000 and 2006 or later, it will mark the first time a jury, not the media, renders judgment in one